That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Rumours, the 13th film directed by Guy Maddin, co-directed by Evan and Galen Johnson, which premiered out of competition at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival. It is being released courtesy of Bleecker Street Media, October 18th, 2024.
These directors?
So Guy Maddin's been around for a minute, and I'm a big fan. Some of my favorites are Saddest Music in the World, Brand Upon the Brain, Tales from the Gimli Hospital, My Winnipeg, and The Forbidden Room. He previously co-directed The Forbidden Room with Evan Johnson, and then the three of them also last directed The Green Fog, which is basically a montage film retelling the narrative of Hitchcock's Vertigo via scenes spliced together from a bunch of other films.
Great. What is Rumours about? The leaders of 7 wealthy democracies get lost in the woods while drafting a statement on a global crisis facing danger as they attempt to find their way out. What is your pull quote?
In the essence of Lindsay Buckingham, Rumours is a film which sometimes, to its detriment, goes its own way, and yet it's so strangely, cosmically unique, one can certainly appreciate an awkwardness which ultimately results in another lonely day.
Mine. For as clever as it is at times, Rumours is even more ridiculous, making it a bit of a slog to get through. Mm-hmm. So the story is, it's the G7 summit. Mm-hmm. So leaders from 7 nations come together to address global issues. And this year it's in Germany. Mm-hmm. So we have Germany, the US, the UK, Japan, France, Italy, Canada. Okay. So it's being held in Germany, and the Chancellor of Germany is played by Cate Blanchett.
Hilda.
And so they all get there, and they're, of course, housed in this big, mansion, and they have staff, and everyone's working. And Cate Blanchett says, I have a surprise. I have a setup for us separate from the house so we can have some privacy.
For their working lunch.
And it's this gazebo that's kind of far off, in the woods behind this property. So they go out there, and we know something's weird pretty quickly because all of a sudden the staff is gone. And they're all ringing their bells because they want more white wine and clean table settings, and there's no one there to help them. So the leader of France,
Denis Ménochet-Sylvain,
who I know from Peter von Kant.
Yes, you also know him from Beau is Afraid, which Galen Johnson worked in the art department of.
Oh.
Ari Aster actually produced this film.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He decides to go off because one of his he's working with the leader of Japan, and one of his papers flies off, so he goes running. And it's daytime when he goes off to find this paper. But it's nighttime when he returns, and he's covered in filth. Mm-hmm. And he tells a story about how he went back to the house. There was no one there. This creature chased him. It's important to know that before they go to the gazebo for their working lunch, Cate Blanchett gave them a tour and showed them something called bog bodies. I didn't look it up, but it was very interesting. Mm-hmm. If it's true, I want to learn more about it. But basically, there's some... bodies are buried in a way that the bones dissolve, but the flesh remains.
So it's a type of mummification.
So we see you can squish the body, but it's still intact. So they look creepy. Mm-hmm. The leader of France is acting like he saw one of those bog bodies chasing him. So he's freaked out.
Even though at the beginning he keeps interrupting Cate Blanchett to talk about how he's writing a book about psychogeography that deals exactly with this kind of thing.
So... now everyone's panicking. A couple of them get separated, but ultimately they decide that they need to get to the river because Cate Blanchett's saying that there's a raft that should be there and they could cross the river to try to get help. But the leader of Canada, because of course no one's phones are working, the leader of Canada gets a text message, and we find out that message is from a predator entrapment bot. So basically they've developed technology to try to catch pedophiles.
Named Astrid.
And this AI is called Astrid. And the Prime Minister of Canada gets one of those text messages because he fits the profile of a pedophile.
Because world leaders have a predisposition.
Men in power are a profile. But anyway, they decide, that bot is working because the phones aren't, so you should engage the bot to make it...
Flirt with the child.
The 7-year-old girl who's claiming she's back at the mansion. So they're telling him, flirt with her so that the authorities will come and get you and save us. And then they decide, well, either way, they should go back to the mansion, because if it's a real 7-year-old girl in danger, we should help her. And if it's not, we should go back so we can get caught. They go back, and the president of the
European Council, which is different from the president of the European Commission,
he's there.
Zlatko Buric, yeah.
And he's like, hey, y'all, I was waiting for y'all because I sent that predator entrapment bot message because the phones aren't working. Okay, well, why did you do that? Because basically, like, there's an apocalypse because Astrid, the AI, is taking over the world. So at this point, the film looks like,
like a Romero film.
And so then the sort of main plot line throughout the entire film is that these leaders are trying to draft a statement.
A provisional statement.
That they're going to issue at the end of the summit. Mm-hmm. So it's the leader of Canada who decides to take everyone's notes, cut them up, and like paste them randomly to give a speech. So he walks out onto the balcony like Eva Peron and gives this like garbled speech that's like nonsense.
But with gusto.
But with gusto. And we see these like bog body zombies. We had seen them once before, which we'll get to, but we see them again watching him give the speech while they're masturbating.
Furiously.
And then once he's done with his speech, the film ends.
Yeah, basically.
So this is clearly a satire.
Yes, and I will agree that it does have moments where it stagnates, but it's still quite interesting, especially with this cast.
It's very clear to me, I'm not familiar with anyone involved, I guess, but it's clear to me that everyone involved, they're smart, funny. I think the overall feeling I got after we finished is that it's underbaked. Like maybe there was this really cool, because there are really cool people in the movie, and maybe they had this opportunity, like we have 2 weeks in July to film this thing, and it all feels very rushed, slapshod. The film, to me, is ugly.
Shot by Stefan Chupek.
And maybe that's on purpose.
It might be on purpose, or just, at a certain level, like this is what we got, so we're going to work with it, because the score would lead me to suggest that they're trying to seem like cheap and sleazy sometimes.
My favorite part of the movie is the score. It reminded me of May December, like
yes.
that overly dramatic, like it works very well. But the film, I mean, it just looks like it's all green screen. And muddy and dark, and I don't know, it got a little tiresome after a while.
It does. I think by the time we get to where they have to get on a raft that goes back and forth, that scene feels especially kind of laborious to get through. But until then, there are some bright moments. I think the Prime Minister of Canada, played by Roy Dupuis, who has a man bun and kind of a love triangle with 3 other women.
Well, let's talk about the leaders. So the Prime Minister of Canada, you mentioned him. Mm-hmm. His issue is that there's a scandal involving, I had to write it down.
A carried interest scandal. Mm-hmm.
Which is basically like insurance fraud, and it involves like some of his family members. So because of that, it would seem he's fallen out of favor. So he plans to resign. Mm-hmm. But it also seems that he's in some sort of love triangle with the leader of the UK.
Cordoza, Nikki Amuka Bird, who we saw in Knock at the Cabin.
And her deal is that it seems like she ran back in 2018 and lost. So if it's set in modern day, it seems like she won the 2022 election. So she seems real fresh and eager.
Oh my God. If I had to, every moment she has, like, we should be working on the provisional statement. She's trying to rally the troops. And you just want somebody to be like, would you just shut?
No, it's not the time, girl. That's like the one, like when your Zoom meeting is almost over and there's that one person who asks a question that makes it go an extra 30 minutes.
Yeah, like, no, just shh.
Okay, then we have the President of the United States, played by a British man.
I love Charles Dance, though, and I think he is very droll in this.
I enjoyed him. Mm-hmm. I don't know why they chose him, but I mean, he's very effective.
He is.
Then we have we mentioned the leader of France. Mm-hmm. And then Italy and Japan, they have nothing to do.
Rolando Rovello and Takahiro Hira. They have less to do, for sure.
Then we have Alicia Vikander.
who shows up very last minute, and she is the president of the European Commission.
Who, I think a funny scene her main scene is that she is speaking, like they all think she's unintelligible because she's not speaking the language they're used to her speaking. I wasn't clear what that language was.
I'm sure it's English.
Or maybe it's English. But ultimately we find out, because there's a moment where like the French leader and the Japanese leader are like talking about all these like
Random,
ancient,
obscure languages.
like long forgotten tongues. And then finally Cate Blanchett's like, oh wait, I took a course, like a crash course in Swedish. She's speaking Swedish. And then all of a sudden Cate Blanchett can really understand her.
Yes, and Vikander, who also has a previous relationship with the Canadian Prime Minister, who's married, by the way. She is found in the woods, Maxime, the Prime Minister of Canada, finds her baggage strewn throughout the forest.
Her badge.
And then finds her, and she's like behind a huge exposed brain.
Huge, like the size of a Volkswagen Beetle.
A human brain.
And that's where it got really...
And I feel like they do nothing with that. And she's talking all this garbled nonsense about how this is the new world power.
I think this is when I got most frustrated with the film, because we're waiting for the ball to drop. Like, we know something's afoot. And then it's like, well, we just see this big brain. And it's like, okay, well, what does this mean? And I still don't know what I think the big brain is supposed to be, because we see that, or we understand that AI is what's causing the... But then there are also like these zombie creatures
that have been reawakened, maybe because of the shifting power structure on the planet. I don't know. But Vikander, Celestine, gets on top of that brain and self-immolates.
Yeah.
So, but it feels like all for naught. Like I think the political humor could have been much more laser focused. Because like with Charles Dance and Roy Dupuis, I get that they're and Cate Blanchett, I get that they're playing with recent respective world leaders of those countries. Like they seem, I can't not help but think of Joe Biden with Charles Dance. Just
right.
At one point, he sits down by a tree and he's like, I'm just going to
He
sleep.
just wants to like die sitting there.
I'm going to sleep and die and be absorbed into the loamy marsh or something. But it just seems like it's not so clear about what is being said. And my pull quote was referencing, the title is supposed to be a reference to the Fleetwood Mac album, Rumours. And I guess I'm not quite sure about how all of that whips together into anything cohesive. And maybe that's the point, that it doesn't need to.
Well, maybe not. I mean, my overall essence was it's mocking the fact that these, there are people who ascend to levels of great power and influence who really are just as dumb as the rest of us. That's what I took these like bog body zombies to be, are us.
The metaphor, yeah.
The metaphor for the public who just like sort of blindly follow these people who are no more capable than we are, really.
Or stuck listening to them because they were the elected officials.
Because I think the significance of what happens when they all go off on their own is, because really these leaders need a team of people, like advisors. Not one person can't know everything. You need a team of knowledgeable, skilled advisors to guide you. And so I do think the significance of these 7 leaders going off on their own and what happens when they don't have advisors around them is significant.
Yeah, they're scatterbrained, tangential, and really devolve into basic human needs, as are evidenced by the ones that are still young enough to do so.
Well, and yeah, because we see that Cate Blanchett and the Prime Minister of Canada go off and have sex.
Which is a funny scene, and that because I think it's amusing.
It's amusing
to hear him snap off a condom that's used and throw it into the woods.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the turning point for the film, where it starts to, I guess, devolve both literally and figuratively. But
we see him, but before he and Germany have sex, he's upset and depressed, and we see him run off with a glass of wine. And then we see that he's written, it's better to burn out than fade away.
Yeah, he's cribbing. Well, and come to find, the speech that he cuts and pastes from everywhere else in the end, he's cribbing from Neil Young. I think that Roy Dupuis, who's a notable Canadian actor, I have fond memories of watching the film Screamers as a child, but he, I think, has some of the funniest moments, because he's always talking about minorities and women and how they're always underseen. And another of the leaders challenges him like, you're a fake, you really don't like strong women. And he screams and pushes him, I love strong women.
There's a moment when all of the leaders are trying to walk to get to the body of water, and they recite the very first statement that was given at the 1975 summit. And I thought that was significant. To me, it represented maybe like there's a clear cutoff of when there was an expectation that world leaders had
Responsibility, accountability.
Well, a responsibility to understand what they're doing and respect the office, and and then now we have these people because like France is inappropriate, Canada's doing shit he shouldn't be doing. The only thing Italy does is it seems that when they were back at the mansion, he pocketed like handfuls of salami. So all he's doing is just handing people slices of salami to eat.
And notably, he's the only one that didn't bring a cell phone with him and can't swim. He swims backwards.
Oh, that's right.
So
okay.
It's clearly, it's like random and weird. And I don't know. Sometimes that's amusing. Like there's a level of detail, like what Roy Dupuis finds the article in about the 6 best speeches ever written is from a magazine that's called Incumbent Life.
Okay, these bog body zombies, we see them at the end with the speech, but that's not the first time we see them. The first time we see them is all the leaders are out wandering the woods and they see a fire, like a bonfire, and then they see all those creatures around it masturbating. And it would seem that when they reach orgasm, their ejaculate puts out the fire. And I don't know what I thought that meant. One of the leaders says their ancient seed has extinguished the flame. I'm sure there's some meaning in there, but it just felt so random and crazy.
Well, it's just very esoteric at the end of the day. But also, I think it's a film you kind of maybe have to be in the mood for a little bit.
Maybe. My final note is when they get back to the mansion and they realize that AI is going to take over the world, Cate Blanchett goes and gives all the leaders a swag bag. And the swag bag contains some snacks, one of those like aluminum foil shock blankets, and then cyanide capsules.
I guess they hand them out at every summit.
So random.
And the theme of this year's summit is supposed to be regrets. And they keep referencing, because this crisis that they're supposed to be giving the provisional statement about, we don't really know what it is.
No.
I think Blanchett says something like, well, there's always some
There's always some
kind of crisis going on.
What would you give Rumours?
I still think it's worth it. And if you're familiar with Maddin's work, I think it does feel visually and narratively a lot different than what you might be used to from him, which I also think is interesting. So and I've seen it twice now, 3.
I think you'd have to be in the mood, but even if you are, I think it's okay. I would give it 2.5 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.